This story begins with an unhinged assassination attempt being prepped on the main character, Shu. VGO suggested his hit squad partners review the mission plan one more time so they wouldn't fumble the bag. Their main task is to catch the target, throw him into a pre-prepared van, and double-check he's actually the right guy. They're offering a massive $1 billion bounty for this kid, which is absolute stonks. Meanwhile, our main character was just casually walking down the street of his hometown, carrying grocery bags in his hands like a total NPC. This wasn't the first time he was being hunted like a raid boss, all because he was gifted with crazy cheat powers. Miller asked his allies if they really needed to direct heavy fire at him, while Garrett added that he literally looks like an ordinary, unathletic Japanese schoolboy. Gabriel told his partners he had zero idea because their client didn't leak all the details on the group chat. He was about to add something about the wild rumors circulating around the protagonist, but VGO shut down the chat, saying he had enough chatter. Gabriel briefly answered that the order was accepted. VGO continued, explaining that according to the server data, there are 0 bodyguards or secret agents in the area where they are going to carry out the capture, and their target is walking completely unsuspected. Gabriel and he will start the action on the street where the protagonist was walking. Using tranquilizer bullets and a taser, they will incapacitate him and capture him. Then they will throw him in the van and their mission will be complete. VGO added that if the victim resists or tries to pull a main character move, Garrett and Miller will join the operation. He was silent for a moment and then called for his allies to begin the operation. VGO, who was about to attack Shu from behind, mentally apologized to him, telling him not to take it personally. He extended his hand to the protagonist, intending to approach him and grab him. But at that moment, absolute cinema happened. VGO suddenly jumped up, bent into an impossible ragdoll pose and fell to the ground, hitting his head. The last thing he thought of was the question, "What's going on?" Gabriel, seeing his partner fall, called out his name, but VGO didn't answer. Gabriel cursed foully, shouting in pure panic that he had no choice but to neutralize the protagonist himself. At that moment, he felt something squelching under his feet. Gabriel realized he couldn't take a single step, as if he was sucked into this liquid that spilled under his feet like a domain expansion trap. He began shouting dirty curses again, shouting in complete confusion, what was happening here? The liquid was slowly but surely sucking him in completely. At that moment, Garrett saw that everything had gone completely cooked. He called Miller, shouting, had VGO or Gabriel already told him? Panic set in as he thought, why couldn't he shout to them? Garrett turned to Miller again and reminded him that they only had control of the security camera for 15 minutes, meaning this was their last chance. Miller was about to climb down from the roof, but suddenly he was frozen solid like he got hit by Todoroki's ice magic. Garrett, watching from below, was amazed at what happened. Was he simply frozen? Having overcome his panic, he realized their deal was ruined. He knew the price was too high for a simple kidnapping, but he didn't think everything would turn out this terribly. He had to run, and he had to do it as fast as possible. But before he could take a step, the protagonist put his hand on his shoulder, approaching him from behind like Sukuna casually appearing behind a target. Garrett was completely finished. At that moment, the protagonist received a call from his younger sister, Kenaz. Kenaz asked him if he had already come back from the store. The protagonist, crouching down near the defeated opponents, answered her that he was almost there. She reminded him that today was his turn to clean up, so he should hurry up and stop throwing. The protagonist remembered that this was true, today was his day. He told his sister that he remembered everything. Shu thought that he should leave anyway to replenish his strength, leaving them here until some random passerby found them. In the end, he decided that he would do so. The protagonist called up the system window to check his status page. Looking at his stats, he noticed that he had some mana left. As he thought, creating ghosts was much more expensive on his MP bar, but he could fight again. He had dealt much more damage than he thought. Maybe his physical strength stat was too high. Next time, he could do more than just knock out his opponents. From now on, he should use magic, though in that case, he would need much more mana. If he had an auto-generated skill, everything would be much easier. At that moment, his phone beeped. He looked at the screen and saw that his sister had sent him a text. She wrote, if he is not home in 5 minutes, he will clean tomorrow. Let him not hang everything on her. The main character cursed under his breath. He lost track of time again and needed to hurry home. This is how Shu lived now. The day he got the game with statuses and skills, the old Shu was no more. And thanks to the game, he began to live in a completely new way. It happened about a year ago. Back then, he was just an unremarkable mid-tier schoolboy living like everyone else. One day, as usual, he was slowly getting ready for school. His sister told him that they would be late this way and told him to hurry up already, puzzled because so much time had passed since they moved here and he should have gotten used to it long ago. He peacefully told her that he understood everything and was already on his way. After a while, they came to school. He went into his class, where his classmates were doing what they could. One boy asked another how his report card was, and the other answered that an angry teacher yelled at him, so his grades leave much to be desired. Two girls were talking about yesterday's stream where a participant's cute makeup routine went viral on TikTok. Someone was wiping the board while someone else was just standing by the window. When Shu entered the classroom, his classmates greeted him. He greeted everyone back, went to his desk, and took out his phone. Tomorrow was already the beginning of summer vacation, so today his class was crazier than usual. While playing his game, he heard his classmates gossiping about him, saying that transfer student is as weird as usual and appeared here strangely. Someone asked what's wrong with him while whispering. The protagonist thought that finally when summer starts, he won't have to deal with these NPCs. Everyone is waiting for summer vacation and it is about to start. Today will be the same as usual, at least he thought so, but at that moment something crazy happened. Suddenly, everyone in the classroom felt sick. Students began to fall to the floor, writhing from headaches and throat reflexes. The protagonist wondered in confusion, what was going on here? What was this? Everyone was groaning and screaming that they felt sick. The protagonist also felt his body suddenly twist and he fell to the floor. At that moment, a magic circle appeared above the blackboard, from which a girl named Asher appeared. She expressed her congratulations to everyone, stating all 25 of them were chosen to become main characters who would save this world. The protagonist, not thinking clearly, tried to understand what she was talking about. Asher meanwhile apologized to everyone for bursting in on them so abruptly, saying her name and adding that she was the one who would be their guide to the parallel world. His classmates, barely coming to their senses, were perplexed. A parallel world? What kind of stupid Isekai joke was this? She asked, do they have a headache? Do they feel sick? Is that right? She told them not to be surprised because this always happens when they acquire special cheat skills, and without it, they won't be able to survive in the world they are going to. They can also look at their skills by simply saying the word status, but they will figure this out later. The protagonist was surprised, 25 people. The girl showed everyone the seating plan and said that now all 25 people indicated on this plan will go to another world, where many dangers and monsters await them, and after going through these trials, they will become heroes and save the world. Then Asher left, disappearing without a trace like a ghost. He remembered the piece of paper she had in her hands. It had been made before he transferred here. There were currently 26 people in their class, including him, which meant his name was not written on this layout. Did that mean he wasn't one of them? He cursed. Why wasn't anything opening? No, he wanted to go home. He didn't have time to think about it. He needed to get out of here quickly before getting hit with a Ray's zero reset. At that moment, a large magic circle appeared above the ceiling of the classroom, and a powerful explosion rang out, shattering the glass in their classroom. He was thrown out into the street, and the last thing he saw were astonished passers-by. The classroom was in disarray, with smoke everywhere and not a soul in sight. After some time, the protagonist, having come to his senses, did not understand where he was. He saw a man in a white coat and glasses standing in front of him. The protagonist asked him where he was, but instead, the doctor asked if he was nauseous or motion sick. Shu answered that he was fine. The doctor said he was glad to hear it, but he would have to stay here for a couple more days for observation. The protagonist thought that the hospitals in the other world looked the same as in their world, asking the doctor again, where are they? The doctor told him that he was in the hospital and shouldn't worry. His family knows he is here and will arrive soon. Shu was surprised because this is the largest hospital in his area, and the doctor told him his family will arrive soon. What kind of nonsense was that with Asher? Did he just have a dream? The protagonist turned to the doctor and asked if he could tell him how he ended up here. The doctor hesitated and then handed him a package, adding that, to be honest, he hadn't planned to give it to him before he was discharged, but before he opens it, he should be prepared for what he will see and not try to find out information through the news feed. The protagonist promised he would do everything like that, intrigued as to why the doctor insisted so much. He opened the package containing his phone, decided to look into it, and saw a news notification appear on the screen. Upon opening the message, the protagonist read that there was an explosion in a middle school. 25 students disappeared without a trace. One survivor is unconscious and in critical condition, the circumstances are unknown, and the investigation is ongoing. The protagonist could not believe what was written. This simply could not be real. Is this really happening? Was this all true, moving to another world? But how did he survive then? It can't be just because of the seating plan. All this was planned before he transferred to this school. The protagonist did not understand anything and began to remember what else the Asher said. She had asked everyone about the headache and nausea, explaining that this happens when special powers appear, and suggested they check how it works later. But he was here, so he was not endowed with special powers just in case. The protagonist decided to check what it was really like. He said the word status, and a floating system window appeared in front of him. Looking at it, the MC was shocked. This simply could not be. Even after he was unable to move to another world, he still received powers. These powers will drive him into despair, destroy him, or on the contrary help, but be that as it may, it completely turned his life upside down. Meanwhile, near the hospital, the police were holding back the onslaught of reporters. One shouted that he heard about the survivor from that middle school, asserting he was definitely in this hospital and demanding an interview for his channel. A female reporter said it was strange that only one person survived during that explosion, questioning if the police were hiding something from them. The reporters began to shout at the same time that they wanted the truth, while the law enforcement officers only asked everyone to step aside, stating only hospital staff are allowed to enter. At that moment, someone knocked on the door of the ward. The protagonist allowed them to enter, and the door opened as Kenaz ran towards him screaming. She hugged her brother at a running start, burst into tears, and said she was very glad that he was okay. Then his father came into the ward, also very glad that his son had woken up. The father asked how he was feeling and if something was bothering him, looking very worried and tired. The main character told him that everything was fine with him and the doctor said he had nothing serious. The father exhaled frantically and said that now he felt such relief. The protagonist felt guilty because his father and sister were so worried about him. As expected, something incredibly strange happened. After his relatives left, the protagonist called up the system window again and looked at his stats. These abilities that the girl gave him were like a character sheet from any video game. It seemed like he wouldn't be able to go touch grass outside anywhere now, but he had plenty of time, so he would test everything. Taking a cup, he thought, skill, maybe he should try it. He called up the skill appraisal targeting a paper cup. The condition was good, and as an additional detail, it was clear that there was some water in the cup. The protagonist thought in surprise. He did it, realizing it was an appraisal. The protagonist looked around the ward looking for something else that could be appraised. His gaze fell on the wall clock, thinking, how about this? MC activated appraisal again, but the system returned an error. The evaluation applied to an object more than 2 meters away is only possible at level 2. Shu noted that it doesn't work at a long distance and questioned how he can raise his level to level 2. He needs to fight monsters, but there are no monsters in this world. Then what can he do? Okay, he will think about it later. The protagonist decided to watch a video in a foreign language. Turning on the video, he realized that the reporter greeted her viewers to discuss one important topic. The protagonist was sweating from the tension as he understood the foreign reporter. Then he decided to watch a video in German and activated universal translation. At that moment, something terrible began to happen to him. His body began to ache and twist, and chills appeared. He lay down on the bed as the system told him that his limit on using powers was exceeded. Translation of 2 languages and evaluation of 1 object. Soon he will have new experience points. The next day the protagonist woke up and thought in confusion, did he just fall asleep? He tried the skills, then felt sick and very weak. The protagonist activated the system window and almost jumped out of bed in surprise. Did his level go up? And from that moment on, he continued to experiment, learning a lot of new things. First, since he had leveled up, his skills improved. He felt like he could earn points just by training. Also, mana was required to use skills, which was restored after sleep, but if he used it up to the end, side effects such as nausea and a severe migraine would appear. He wondered what would happen if he used his power even when his mana was already running out. He tried this experiment as well, but he felt very sick as black smoke came out of his mouth like he was going through a dark shadow overload. At that moment, Kenaz came to him and was terrified to see her brother in such a state, proving he should be careful with his mana level. After some time, he was finally discharged from the hospital. Returning home, he happily fell onto his bed and thought that he was finally home. It had been 2 weeks since that day. In the end, the police blamed it on a gas leak at the school, though many online conspiracy theories deny this because he was able to survive. He was not allowed to move on his own until today, and fortunately, he did not have to change his name, family, or their faces. But in the end, he made his father and sister worry, thinking that soon he would be able to repay them. He activated his status again. Throughout his stay in the hospital, he steadily increased his level. By the fifth day, he could already feel how much mana he had without looking at the system, and now he very rarely experienced side effects. However, since he had maxed out his translation and appraisal skills, he could no longer gain experience points. It seemed that he could acquire new skills with something called SB, because the system displayed information that new skills were available that required a certain amount of this SB. Fire and ice magic required 10 SB each, while air, water, and earth magic required 5 SB each. It looked like mana alone would not be enough and he needed to analyze everything. He was in modern Japan now, a place without any monsters, so how was he supposed to earn this new level? What should he do? At that moment, he received a notification from the game. He looked at the message, reflecting that because of all this, he had not logged in for so long, but questioning why he should do this now anyway. He already had enough of the advantages, the skills that he had already pumped up, so there was no need to pump it up further. After these languid days spent in the hospital, he needed to stop doing this useless nonsense. How good it would be to return to his old life. He looked at his status again and was very surprised. His acquired skills were water and air magic, and also teleportation magic. He thought with delight that now he had these skills too, but questioned why he was so happy about it. Maybe there is no reason for it after all. He just wants to improve his skills and become even stronger, and he doesn't need anything else. The protagonist decided to test teleportation and managed to move a water bottle into a trash can, which impressed him greatly. He checked his mana level and saw it was sufficient, thinking that being able to move to any place could be useful, but wondering if this meant that he himself could move. Shu stood next to the bed, activated space teleportation, and instantly appeared in another corner of his room like a Minato flying Raijin. He rejoiced. It was simply unbelievable that he was able to do it. Suddenly he coughed very hard and got a headache, thinking in confusion, did the magic stop? Looking at his indicators, the protagonist realized that he had run out of mana. Did he really use it all to move the bottle to the trash can? It seemed that he could not use this spell on a permanent basis, but thanks to this, he could level up again. Suddenly his head spun and he fell to the floor, unable to even move, let alone get up. Opening his eyes, the protagonist heard the worried voice of his father asking if he was okay. Shu sat up in bed as his dad breathed a sigh of relief, remarking, "Thank God he was okay. He slept for a whole day." He asked if he was okay, noting Shu scared him by falling asleep on the floor. The protagonist felt awkward in front of his father, apologized, and assured his father that he was okay, asking if it was his father who put him on the bed. His father told him that it was, and the protagonist thanked his parent from the bottom of his heart. It was time for his father to go to work, and he asked Shu not to overdo it. The protagonist promised him that everything would be okay. When his father left, the protagonist said that he needed to try harder next time to lock in. He activated the system window and was surprised to note that he was now level 13. Now he needed to focus on levels and try water magic, supposing that it was worth doing in the bathroom. Leaving the room into the hallway, he met Kenaz. The protagonist wished her a good morning, but the sister did not respond and slammed the door of her room. The protagonist thought sadly that he must have caused a lot of trouble for her when he was in the hospital, assuming she hated him now. Entering the bathroom, Shu noted that he needed to make sure Kenaz did not notice him. He activated his new skill, water magic, and a small drop of water appeared in the air, which immediately burst, splashing his face. The protagonist thought disappointedly that this was certainly not what he expected, having chosen this skill because he thought it would be useful, but realizing he was wrong. The protagonist bumped his head into the wall and noted that he had a bad feeling about this. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound behind him. Turning around, the protagonist saw a huge stream of water swirling like a wave. Before the protagonist could understand anything, the water balloon burst, making such a terrible sound that it echoed throughout the entire house. Kenaz, sitting at the table in her room, heard it and exclaimed, "What was that again?" Going downstairs, she shouted to her brother, asking if he heard that loud sound. Looking into the bathroom, the girl saw the protagonist sitting on the floor in a large puddle of water. He apologized to her, asking if he scared her. The sister asked what he was doing, and the protagonist lied to her that he got into the shower while still half asleep. Nothing happened to his body, right? He examined himself and noted that he was fine. Kenaz, having made sure that he was fine, left. Shu wondered if she was really worried about him after all, although she had been so angry a minute ago, but it scared him too. Just as he imagined the water rushing out like a flood, such a huge water ball-shaped thing flew out. In addition, he suddenly felt tired and weak. Opening the system window, he noticed that his MP level had dropped significantly, so he should be careful when using it. After that, the protagonist conducted many experiments and eventually found out some things. Magic skills are highly dependent on the user's imagination, and most importantly, the MP spent on a magic skill is determined by the scale of imagination. He tried using water magic again with little imagination. Then the protagonist decided to erase it and try again, only this time visualizing a water path. The water cloud became larger. Shu looked at his indicators and realized that with minimal MP consumption, he can achieve successful activation of the skill. The protagonist noted that this was great news. The setting was complete, and this was now his way to steadily gain experience. But how much effort he spent. If he makes a mistake with his imagination, the skill will not work, or on the contrary, too much MP is spent. Shu summed up, be that as it may, the main thing now is for him not to forget this feeling and to use skills every day to gain experience. After some time, during another training session of the protagonist, the system notified him that he had reached the required amount of experience and his level was increased. The protagonist again turned to the system and exclaimed in surprise, noting this is what a level increase looks like, as it was the first time he saw it in real life. Shu realized that his body characteristics had also increased significantly. By the way, when he underwent a medical examination immediately after transferring to a new school, the results were quite average for the country, so if that was level 1, he wondered how much his physical abilities had improved now. At that moment, his sister knocked on his door and asked if she could come in. Of course, he allowed her. The sister opened the door slightly, looking embarrassed, and wanted to tell him about this morning. The protagonist asked if she meant the shower. Kenaz replied that she did not want to say that, hesitated, and then suggested that he forget about it. She mentioned she was going to buy groceries for lunch and dinner and asked if he would come with her. Shu expressed his willingness to go with her, noting he needed to prepare, thinking she was definitely angry for the inconvenience caused since he was just sitting in the hospital without going anywhere, while Kenaz had to cancel her classes so as not to attract attention to herself. The protagonist decided that he would leave the stat check for later, and today he would focus on paying her back for the 2 weeks of inconvenience that he caused her. Meanwhile, Kenaz stood outside the door thinking about her own things, remembering how she and her father came to the hospital when Shu seemed to be still asleep since yesterday. He often experienced nausea and its aftereffects, and then he would faint and sleep for a long time. Earlier, the teacher told her that there had been an accident at her brother's school, and remembering this, tears appeared in her eyes as she thought that her brother was an idiot. In July, on a certain day, all the newspapers were full of news that a mysterious explosion occurred in the middle school. Fortunately, one male student who was found survived and is already recovering, while 25 other students are still missing. Meanwhile, in another world, Princess Priscilla appeared in front of the protagonist's classmates and greeted the 25 valiant heroes, introducing herself as the princess of this country. The classmates standing on the magic circle looked at her in bewilderment, as the princess declared that from today on they will serve the kingdom of Sental in destroying the Demon King. After some time, they arrived at a place in the forest for another training session. One of the classmates said to the other that they were suddenly transported here for some fight with the Demon King. In general, nothing is clear, but skills and magic are a bit cool, don't you think? The interlocutor noted that he understood him, adding that school was just stressful and maybe here it's even better. The coach shouted at them to stop chatting and focus on training, so the allies fell silent and reported that they understood everything. The second classmate noted, today is a hunt for low-level monsters, right? He already wanted to use spectacular magic. At this moment, Seiya Amaga's system window reported that the required amount of experience had been reached and his level was raised. The first classmate exclaimed that he raised his level again, noting that after all, they had only recently arrived here and he was earning experience so quickly. It was not for nothing that he was their class president scaling his stats like Gojo. Meanwhile, Amaga's level was 10. A classmate turned to the class president and asked him what skill he had learned now, and Amagi demonstrated ice magic to her. The girl admiringly noted that it was very cool. While the coach said as expected of him, he was head and shoulders above everyone else, and it seemed he would overtake them very soon. Amagi sheepishly replied that he was still far from perfect, so the coach advised him to make sure that his MP did not run out, warning that if he lost all his magical energy, he would fall right on the spot, and if this happened in front of monsters, he would become completely defenseless and that would be the end of him. In any situation, he advised him to use magic to a minimum. Amagi told him that he understood that, noting that after all, he was the best, even in theory. The coach laughed and noted that it was encouraging, but stated that it was time for them to go on the next hunt. At the same time, our boy was out here trying to test another spell in his inventory, but the physics engine completely folded on him. He cursed under his breath like a toxic lobby player. He tried to activate high-tier ice magic, but he overdid it with his imagination again, looking like Todoroki accidentally freezing an entire stadium. Ice was literally everywhere. He tried to cope by blaming it on the summer heat wave, admitting that the temperature made him fumble his spell settings. Right on cue, the system window illuminated with a level up notification, informing him that he had reached the required experience threshold. However, Shu didn't even drop a W in the chat. His level had officially hit 35. He stared at his stat page, reflecting on how 3 whole months had passed since the middle school explosion, and his solo leveling routine was going smoother than a speedrun. Still, his inner sweatlord wondered if he could optimize his exp gains even further. From the news feeds, he learned that after the mysterious explosion, the school building was deemed completely unsafe, forcing all the NPC students to switch to online distance learning. Thanks to this absolute blessing, he managed to avoid unnecessary eye contact in his new virtual class and focus entirely on his grinding arc. Though to be fair, his early testing phase had been an absolute disaster. He had managed to successfully pull off short-range spatial movement magic, but half the time he would completely exhaust his MP at the spawn point and collapse like an AFK player. Or he would try to test his healing spells, causing his sister to completely misunderstand his intentions and think he was losing his mind. Looking back on it now, it was peak comedy, but at that exact moment his health bar was suffering. Shu decided it was time to unlock a brand new utility skill. Right on cue, an angry text notification buzzed on his phone from Kenaz, sharply reminding him to go buy a sack of rice because today was officially his turn to handle the house chores. Shu let out a massive, defeated sigh. Since they only had one parent who worked late shifts, the cooking, cleaning, washing, and grocery raids were divided strictly between the two of them. Now he had to make a run to the local store, leaving him wishing for a cheat skill that could carry his loot. He couldn't just teleport to the supermarket using magic, since his MP pool didn't have that kind of range yet. At that exact second, his eyes locked onto a skill called inventory in the system tree. His brain completely short-circuited. Was this literally a pocket dimension storage system from classic RPGs? He tapped the screen, and the system notified him that the skill had been successfully acquired. Shu immediately cast appraisal on the new ability to inspect its frame data, but the basic description offered zero useful details besides dropping a massive nerf. He could only store a single item at level 1. Deciding to test the mechanics anyway, he activated the skill, and a massive, glowing holographic cube materialized right in front of his face. Shu stared at the floating visual effect, wondering if he was doing this right. He brought the heavy grocery bag up to the cube, and the entire bag instantly vanished from his hands, storing itself inside the spatial pocket. Shu watched in absolute awe, noting to himself that this utility spell was completely broken, thinking that if he could just upgrade the storage capacity, it would be an absolute flex. Then he remembered the receipt. Was it still inside the bag? Realizing he could just dump the entire bag with all his purchases straight into the spatial pocket, he stepped out of the store, ducked into an alleyway away from the eyes of random NPCs, and summoned the inventory cube. Instantly, his hands were completely free as his entire haul vanished into storage. The system read out the itemized list of contents to him, and Shu grinned like a gamer who had just discovered a day 1 glitch. Doing his usual experiment phase, he confirmed the current level limit meant his inventory could technically only count 1 item at a time, meaning a single bag filled with a mug, a pencil, a book cover, a pencil case, a garbage bag, plastic packaging, chopsticks, a mechanical pencil, and an eraser all counted as one consolidated object. He checked his user interface, noting that the spell had only drained 40 MP, a completely acceptable trade-off for practical use. He had officially struck gold on this pull. It was time to head back to base. While walking down the suburban street, a voice suddenly called out his name. He turned around to find a girl named Fujisawa Haruna standing in front of him. She offered a polite smile, remarking that this was the first time they were seeing each other face to face from such a close distance. Shu stared at her with complete NPC energy, wondering who on earth this side character was. The girl introduced herself by name, hoping it would ring a bell, prompting Shu to feverishly search his brain files, until he finally realized she was literally their official class representative. Haruna mentioned that since he had recently transferred into their online class, she was just glad he finally recognized her, asking if he was out buying dinner ingredients. Shu nodded, replying that he was, while secretly wondering why she was approaching him. They had literally never spoken a single word in class. Was she about to interrogate him about the middle school incident? Shu narrowed his eyes, directly asking if she needed something from him. Haruna stammered slightly, explaining that she had just accidentally spotted him walking by and decided to drop a quick hello. She admitted that ever since the school switched to online classes, she had barely spoken to any of her classmates, but apologized if she was interrupting his schedule. Shu quickly reassured her that it was totally fine, realizing his internal monologue was being way too paranoid. He knew her from the class video calls as a serious, hardworking student representative. Feeling a pang of guilt for suspecting her of being an enemy agent, he offered a quiet apology. Haruna smiled softly, telling him she understood entirely, gently noting that the middle school incident must have been insanely traumatic for him and promising she wouldn't pry into his personal life, stating that everyone has things they want to keep hidden. Shu was genuinely caught off guard by her emotional intelligence. Realizing how late it was getting, the girl apologized for holding him up, saying goodbye and reminding him they would see each other in tomorrow's online lecture. Shu watched her walk away, muttering to himself about what that random encounter was all about. Just to be safe, he cast appraisal on her retreating figure from a distance. The system window popped up with her target file, age 14, physical status, severe malnutrition, internal hemorrhaging, psychological status, severe emotional trauma, system note, physical and psychological perception heavily altered due to ongoing domestic violence. Shu stared at the readout in utter shock, wondering what kind of dark backstory was hidden behind her polite smile. When he returned home, he began unloading the massive mountain of groceries onto the kitchen counter. Kenaz walked into the room, staring at the pile of food in complete disbelief, asking if he had literally carried all of those heavy bags home by himself. Shu put on his best Sigma face, lying through his teeth that he had been grinding his physical fitness at the gym, so carrying heavy loads was light work. Kenaz just laughed at his flex in total bewilderment. However, Shu's mind was completely occupied by the class representative's stat sheet. He knew the system's appraisal skill was incapable of lying. He recalled her exhausted facial expressions, the ridiculously heavy, long-sleeved clothes she was wearing on a scorching hot summer day, her skittish, fearful body language, and the brief, terrifying glimpse of dark bruises wrapping around her wrists right before she walked away. An intense wave of disgust washed through his chest, but he knew that without concrete evidence, he was just a random classmate. He couldn't just jump in like an anime protagonist without a plan, so he tried to force himself to forget about it for the night. Turning around, he noticed Kenaz was sitting slouched on the sofa, looking completely depressed. Shu walked over, asking why she was sighing like a tragic anime character and if something bad had happened. Kenaz let out a heavy breath, explaining that she had found out today that Haruna, whom she used to be super close with, had officially quit their martial arts dojo. She admitted she saw it coming since Haruna hadn't shown up to practice in months, but she was still deeply upset about losing her training partner. Shu listened quietly, observing that if Kenaz was this torn up about it, Haruna must be an absolute wholesome person. He asked his sister to confirm the girl's last name, and Kenaz nodded, gushing about how Haruna was ridiculously strong, incredibly kind, and respected by everyone at the dojo, mentioning that she was actually the class representative at Shu's new school. Shu pressed further, asking if Kenaz knew the actual reason why Haruna had abruptly dropped out of the dojo. Kenaz shook her head, mentioning that she only heard rumors about Haruna experiencing severe personal difficulties at home. Shu's mind immediately flashed back to the system's appraisal report, physical and psychological exhaustion due to ongoing violence and threats. The pieces of the puzzle clicked together instantly. Looking at his sad sister, Shu asked if tomorrow was officially her assigned day to handle the household chores. Kenaz offered a gloomy nod, but Shu suddenly cut in, declaring that he would take over all her chores tomorrow so she could just take a break and touch some grass. Kenaz blinked in utter shock at his sudden generosity, but didn't argue. The next day, the online lecture wrapped up, and the teacher requested Haruna to give the final dismissal command to the virtual classroom. Haruna fulfilled her class rep duties politely, bowing to the webcam as the teacher thanked her for her hard work. Right as Haruna was about to close her laptop, her screen flashed with an incoming friend request from Shu. She accepted it, and instantly, a private message popped up from him, asking if she happened to know a girl named Kenaz. Haruna typed back, asking if he was by any chance Kenaz's older brother. Shu confirmed it, mentioning that his sister had been talking about her last night. Haruna then asked if he was planning on doing another grocery run to the supermarket later today. Shu replied that he was, prompting Haruna to send a follow-up message proposing that if he was free, they could meet up at 5 p.m. near the store so she could answer any questions he had. Shu stared at the screen, smiling to himself as he realized his plan to establish contact had actually worked. Checking the time, he noted that he needed to hurry up and lock in. Summoning his glowing floating UI, Shu prepped his stat page, resolving to use the remaining time to grind his magic skills before the meeting. The story picked up right at the designated meeting spot outside the supermarket where Haruna had been waiting, prompting Shu to quickly jog up, offer a polite apology, and ask if he had kept her waiting long. Haruna offered a gentle shake of her head, replying that it was completely fine and apologizing on her end for suddenly calling him out on such short notice, mentioning that she had to hurry up and finish some grocery shopping for dinner soon. She asked how his sister Kenaz was holding up, and Shu explained that she was genuinely upset after finding out that Haruna had suddenly quit the kendo club, noting that Kenaz had gotten very attached to her as both a mentor and a friend. Haruna let out a heavy sigh, looking down as she admitted that she understood completely and felt terrible for letting his sister down during an already difficult time. Shu decided to ask the main question on his mind, asking if her sudden departure was actually because of the situation at home. With nowhere left to hide, Haruna admitted that he was right, looking visibly down and drained. Judging by the results of his previous skill assessment, Shu knew her home environment was close to the worst possible setup imaginable. He told her that since Kenaz was genuinely worried, if anything happened or if things became too difficult to handle alone, she should feel free to tell him. They shook hands and Haruna nodded softly, apologizing for taking up his time before saying goodbye until tomorrow's class. The moment Shu returned home, Kenaz called out from the hallway, asking if he was finally back. He confirmed he was and casually mentioned that he had just run into Haruna at the store. Kenaz gasped in pure surprise, asking in disbelief if he had actually met her, prompting Shu to say that he had and that Haruna sent her best regards. Kenaz asked if Haruna looked okay, and Shu noted that while she looked a little tired, she seemed fine overall. Satisfied with the answer, Kenaz went back to her room while Shu went straight to his desk, eager to test out his abilities. Sitting on his bed, he activated his tracking and search magic, a skill he had learned yesterday specifically to find out more about Haruna's circumstances. The ability worked in two main ways. First, the ability to track a specific target anywhere on the map, which only worked on something the user had physically touched, making their previous handshake very useful. While the search function alone couldn't reveal every hidden detail about nearby objects, combining it with his appraisal skill allowed him to fill in all the missing information. He used appraisal to check the link, realizing his late-night tests before falling asleep had not been a waste of time, but what he saw did not please him at all. He muttered in bitterness and shock, staring at the harsh reality of what Haruna was going through on a daily basis. Knowing he had very little time, he began to think about what he could possibly do for her. Meanwhile, over at Haruna's house, the girl was busy washing dishes in the kitchen when her mother came in, acting loud and cheerful in a drunken state. Her mother told Haruna to go to the store and buy her some beer, but Haruna replied discontentedly that she was a minor and legally could not buy alcohol. Her mother cursed under her breath and dropped the subject, leaving Haruna to wash the dishes while bitterly wondering when their house had become so broken. Her mother drank constantly without a care, neglecting her children and parental responsibilities, and it had all started over some small argument between her parents years ago. Over time, the fights between her mother and father had become a daily thing until they completely stopped speaking to each other, though back then, they at least cared a little about the kids. But one day during Haruna's first year of middle school, her father stopped coming home, vanishing completely and leaving the family forever. A full year had passed since his disappearance, and their mother had completely lost interest in her children, dumping all the household chores and the heavy burden of caring for her younger brothers onto Haruna's shoulders. Her mother suddenly interrupted her thoughts, demanding that Haruna at least go out and buy something to eat with the beer. Having nowhere else to go, Haruna agreed, adding that she still needed to buy groceries for dinner so she would be out for a while, to which her mother reacted indifferently. Taking her purse from the counter, Haruna wanted to leave quickly, feeling like she could no longer even look this woman in the face. But when she opened the purse, she saw it was completely empty. In shock, Haruna asked her mother if she had spent the household money. Her mother chuckled and apologized carelessly, claiming she simply ran out of cash and had to take from that amount. Haruna asked in amazement what she was talking about, but her mother brushed her off and told her to figure it out herself. Haruna felt completely helpless. Once a month, her father left her a little money for living, which was all that kept her and her brothers afloat, and this woman had spent everything without a single thought. Haruna almost cried from resentment, knowing that getting angry at her mother was useless. Right then, her mother added that she almost forgot to tell her the main thing. Kajiwara was coming again today, so she should be on her best behavior. The moment she heard that name, Haruna's blood ran cold with horror. She left the house and went dejectedly toward the store, hating the thought of going home. She couldn't just go to a friend's house because she had her brothers to protect, and while she could put up with her mother, that man was pure hell. She was trembling so much that she shuddered when Shu caught up with her on the street and called her name. Haruna looked at him in surprise as Shu carefully examined her pale face, asking if she was feeling okay. Haruna forced an artificial laugh, saying she was just lost in thought, and noted that they had met again. Shu explained that lately he had been doing the shopping instead of Kenaz, prompting Haruna to nod in understanding. She asked how Kenaz was doing and if she was still upset, but Shu mentioned that Kenaz wanted to talk to her and asked if Haruna could call his sister today. Haruna hesitated, knowing that Kenaz was nice and wanted to see each other again, but she worried that calling might lead to her complaining about her own life. Noticing the look on her face, Shu gently told her that no one was forcing her, but Kenaz genuinely wanted to be someone she could rely on, suggesting she should try to trust her without worrying too much. Haruna looked at him in surprise. Having someone to rely on was something she hadn't experienced in a long time. She answered that she would call Kenaz before leaving, thinking to herself that even though Shu rarely showed his emotions, he was just as kind as his sister. Returning home from the store, Haruna sat down in her room and finally called Kenaz. When Kenaz answered, she was completely surprised, asking if it was really Haruna calling. Haruna laughed softly, confirming it was her and asking if Kenaz could talk, to which Kenaz happily agreed, saying how wonderful it was to talk to her again. Kenaz suggested switching to a video call, and after Haruna figured out how to set it up, both girls were very happy to see each other on screen. Kenaz began telling her about what was going on in her life, proudly mentioning that she was finally able to do the move Haruna had shown her at the dojo. Haruna felt happy for her, realizing how long it had been since she felt so calm and relaxed. After a moment of silence, Kenaz hesitantly said she had heard things were difficult at home, and told Haruna that if she needed anything, she could always turn to her. Touched by the concern, Haruna felt ready to open up after keeping everything quiet for a full year. Just as she began to say she had something to share, Kenaz's expression changed to surprise on the screen, asking who the man standing behind her was and if that was her father. Before Haruna could turn around, Kajiwara addressed her in an ominous voice as the class president, saying it was not good of her to ignore him. He reached out and grabbed her hand, causing Haruna to say his name in complete fear. Kenaz anxiously asked what was wrong through the phone, but Haruna couldn't answer as Kajiwara asked if she was on a call, muttering that he hoped it wasn't a guy. That awful man was their homeroom teacher, who had become her mother's second husband, living in their house and tormenting her every single day. The man threw her to the floor, and as Haruna fell, he said he should give her a lesson in discipline. Haruna knew his real target was not her mother, but her, and knowing this, her mother still continued to let him inside. Her little brothers came running to her screams, calling out to her in panic. Haruna looked at them with tears in her eyes, feeling disgusted and knowing she had to run, but she was powerless against a grown, healthy man. The brothers cried bitterly looking at their sister as the man began to strangle her. In a strained, hoarse voice, Haruna desperately asked her brothers to go to their room, promising them that everything would be fine. The terrified boys froze in place until she shouted at them to go faster, forcing them to run away and hide. Haruna turned her face away, but Kajiwara shouted at her not to turn away from him. He asked why she didn't understand, claiming he was seriously thinking about her future and saying that if she stayed in this house, everything would only get worse, but if she was his, a happy life awaited her. Haruna thought in pure despair, wondering why a demon in human form was allowed to call himself a teacher, begging inside her mind for anyone to come and help her. At that moment, a strong wind suddenly rose inside the room, twisting the teacher and violently throwing him aside against the wall. Shu had arrived, having used his wind spell to come to her aid. He ran up to the girl, called her by name, and told her to run. Haruna called out his name in amazement, asking why he was here. Shu told her that now was not the time for questions and that she needed to leave quickly, so Haruna ran out of the room without hesitation. Kajiwara got back up from the blow and asked Shu who he was and if he was trying to take Haruna away from him. Shu angrily noted that the man didn't even recognize his own student, realizing that facing a drunk, violent adult was genuinely dangerous. Suddenly, a knife flashed in the homeroom teacher's hand. Screaming for Shu to die, the man rushed at him with the blade, but Shu used another wind spell to throw him back again, refusing to run away. The teacher cursed and swung his knife once more, but Shu used a teleportation spell, moving the knife from the man's hand to another place entirely. Kajiwara stared in amazement at his empty hand and then at Shu, asking in confusion where his knife went. Shu replied that who knew where it was now, simply needing to buy some time. Having heard about the call from Kenaz earlier, he had called the police before teleporting to the house, and hearing a sound in the corridor, Shu felt relief, thinking the officers had arrived. However, the teacher grinned. Instead of the police, his friend named Yasunori stepped into the room with a wooden bat on his shoulder. Shu stared in surprise as Kajiwara told his friend he was late, while Yasunori made excuses about letting a guy slip away outside. Shu used appraisal to scan the man, learning that his name was Hamada Yasunori, age 26, dealing with addiction and holding a past criminal record. Shu realized this guy definitely did not belong around a middle school teacher, but right then, Shu felt a wave of weakness, noticing he had less than 10% of his mana left. If he tried to teleport the bat, he would run out of energy and be completely doomed against two grown men. Yasunori swung the bat with full force, shouting at Shu to die, with Kajiwara cheering him on to break all the boy's bones. Yasunori dealt a powerful blow, but the bat completely shattered into pieces upon hitting Shu, leaving the boy standing completely alive and unharmed. The men were entirely speechless, with Yasunori shouting in terror about what was going on. Shu was just as surprised as they were, realizing that instead of pain, he had only felt a slight touch. It clicked in his mind that all the defensive stats he had been building were fully protecting his body. Deciding to test his physical strength, Shu walked up to Yasunori and flicked his forehead, instantly knocking the man down cold. Content that his stats were working, he asked Kajiwara if he wanted one too, causing the terrified teacher to crawl away in fear and beg him to stop right before Shu made his move. A while later, police cars were parked outside the building, and officers went inside to find Kajiwara motionless on the floor. Outside, Haruna walked up to Shu with a warm smile, saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time after everything that happened. Kajiwara, his friends, and the mother were all arrested, bringing all the cruelty Haruna had suffered to light. Shu asked how her brothers were doing, and Haruna showed him a photo on her phone, explaining that they were now living safely with their grandparents. It turned out their grandparents had been worried about not hearing from them for a long time, and were the first to raise the alarm once they learned about the situation. Haruna looked at the screen happily, saying they were very kind people. Shu asked if she was really okay coming back here alone, and Haruna explained that she had a lot of memories in that house and wanted everyone together for graduation, adding that she had convinced her grandparents to let her stay. Shu felt that if that was what she wanted, it was the right choice. Haruna then laughed about the rumors, mentioning that the suspects were telling nonsense during interrogation, claiming they were attacked by a monster, which the police simply wrote off as drunkenness since no evidence was found. Suddenly, Kenaz walked up, complaining that her brother was too loud before happily turning to Haruna, saying it had been too long. Haruna agreed, glad to see her, while Kenaz admiringly noted that Haruna looked much more cheerful and was finally heading back to the dojo today. Kenaz told Shu to hang out the laundry at home, after which she and Haruna walked away together. Shu sighed and turned to head home, but Haruna asked Kenaz to wait a second and ran back over to him. Leaning in, she whispered, asking who he really was beneath his quiet front. Shu replied that he was just an ordinary middle school student, prompting Haruna to grin and ask if that day was going to be their secret. She thanked him warmly with a smile and said goodbye until next week, leaving Shu looking after her, reflecting on the fact that this was the very first time he had used his abilities to save a real person. Shu moved across the rooftops of the city and used presence-blocking magic to test his skills, finding that his abilities were working smoothly. Summoning his status window, he looked at his stats and wondered where he would go next. Nearly 2 years had passed since the original teleportation incident, and 26 students who had received power from Asher were each working hard to grow stronger in their own separate ways. Across another world in the kingdom of Sentinel, a large monster fight was taking place. A student shouted for everyone to keep their focus as a massive manticore appeared before them, asking in fear if they could really defeat such a creature. The Holy Knight ordered the tanks to step forward, the mages to line up their magic, and the physical fighters to block attacks while the supports fired spells from a distance. The team struck repeatedly, but the monster remained unharmed until Ren and Ryoga combined their wind and water attacks to deal heavy damage. The knight gathered magic into his sword, asked the Spirit of Light for power, and hit the beast with a sacred strike. Seeing the manticore still moving, he drove his blade straight into the creature's eye, securing the victory as the others cheered. Later that evening, a grand feast was held in the castle to celebrate the victory, with everyone raising toasts. Seiya was standing off to the side quietly having a drink when Princess Priscilla approached, asking why the main hero of the night was standing alone in the corner. Seiya respectfully replied that she shouldn't worry about him, admitting he felt embarrassed because the fight could have gone much better without his allies getting hurt. Ren appeared beside him, telling him not to carry the entire burden alone just because he was the hero, reminding him that the others wanted him to enjoy the party. Seiya smiled and agreed to relax, and Priscilla suggested they go check out the rare desserts being served. Watching from across the room, another classmate complained about how lucky Seiya was to be around 2 pretty girls, telling his friends they needed to work harder to achieve similar success. Back in Japan, Shu was sitting on the edge of a tall building, using wind magic to float down from the 10th floor. Looking at his watch, he realized how late it had gotten and knew he needed to get back home because tomorrow was his entrance ceremony. Shu straightened the tie of his school uniform, remarking that he had finally become a senior and wasn't entirely used to it. Kenaz asked if he was ready, and Shu looked at her in surprise, noting how strange it felt to hear her call him brother so respectfully. Kenaz told him to move along. Walking down the cold street, he began to shiver until Kenaz handed him a pocket warmer, which he thanked her for, thinking she was quite kind. Kenaz warned him not to mix up his classes on the first day, and Shu took his path to school. While walking alone through an alley, Shu suddenly felt a presence behind him as a group of street thugs lined up in his path. The lead guy asked if he was the one who had beaten up Yasunori 2 years ago. Shu turned around, realizing that after the Kajiwara incident, he had acted carelessly and left loose ends. Shu told them they had the wrong person, but the guy grabbed him by the collar, claiming they knew it was him. A moment later, the thug was knocked out on the ground. Shu sighed, annoyed that people were causing problems on the morning of his entrance ceremony, and used healing magic alongside memory suppression so the man wouldn't remember what had happened. Arriving at school, Shu found his assigned classroom and took an empty seat in the far back corner, glad that the homeroom teacher hadn't arrived yet so he could relax. Suddenly, the room started whispering as a girl named Kyuan appeared at the door. Classmates looked at her with pure admiration, whispering about how beautiful and doll-like she looked. Shu looked over and acknowledged that she was undeniably pretty. She offered a small, polite nod, and he nodded back, noticing the stares from the other students. A classmate named Renero leaned over, whispering about how lucky they were to sit near such a pretty girl, asking Shu if they could switch seats, which left Shu confused. Just then, their homeroom teacher Hinami entered, wishing everyone a good morning and hoping for a great year together. She asked everyone to take their seats for self-introductions. Shu stood up when his turn came, saying that he liked games, knew how to cook, and hoped for a good school year. When it was Kyuon's turn, she stood up and gave a brief, distant introduction that made Shu feel as though she was subtly telling people not to approach her. He thought to himself that they came from different worlds and were unlikely to have anything in common. At dinner that night, Kenaz asked how his day went, and Shu said everything was fine, smiling when she told him not to get involved in any dangerous incidents again. A week later, Shu slipped out of the house after dinner to test his stamina, using presence-blocking magic to move across the city. Wanting to see how far he could run without tiring, he headed deep into the mountain forest instead of the city center. Standing among the trees, he caught his breath, but suddenly heard the sound of fighting nearby. Hiding behind the bushes, he was shocked to see a swarm of monsters and a girl fighting them in secret. It was Kyuon. A stream of energy burst from her hands, wiping out several monsters, but more beasts quickly surrounded her, forcing her to grit her teeth in frustration. Shu watched quietly, realizing that fighting so many enemies at once was dangerous, deciding that if he walked away and left her alone, he would regret it. Kyuon stood surrounded by the monsters, reflecting on how she had only been ordered by her clan to destroy small spirit-level demons that had escaped a seal, which was why she had come with standard gear. However, a massive horned demon stood before her, emanating a powerful dark aura that rivaled high-ranking demon commanders. She realized her clan had sent her into an impossible fight, but refusing to let the demons run free, she attached a seal to her hand, preparing to cast a self-destruct spell to take them all down with her. Right before she could activate it, Shu suddenly appeared in front of her. Kyuon shouted in panic, telling the stranger to get out of there, but Shu used his magic to gather the smaller monsters together and throw them aside effortlessly. Kyuon watched in absolute amazement, noting that his movements were entirely superhuman yet held zero demonic aura, wondering if he was even human. The giant horned demon glared at Shu in fury, demanding to know how he dared to touch his subordinates, and swung a massive greatsword down at the boy. The heavy blade struck with massive force, kicking up dust, but when it cleared, the sword was stuck in the ground, parried cleanly by Shu's single bare fist. Kyuon couldn't believe her eyes, knowing a normal person could never block a blade like that. Seeing his attack blocked, the demon panicked and tried to bargain, asking Shu if he wanted treasure and offering prayer beads that could sell for 10 gold coins if he spared his life. Kyuon yelled at Shu not to listen, warning that demons were deceitful creatures that tricked people to take their lives. The demon snapped at her to be quiet, but Shu simply swung his fist into the monster's jaw, launching the massive demon high into the sky, where its body exploded and scattered across the ground. Kyuon stood frozen in utter confusion, wondering what kind of impossible strength she had just witnessed. She wanted to ask him who he was and if he was an enemy of humans, but right as she stepped forward, Shu casually checked his watch, activated a teleportation portal, and vanished into thin air, leaving Kyuon completely alone in the dark forest, wondering what had just happened.